the 55 Cadillac floor pan. So far as I know, you can't buy the whole complete floor pan. You can only buy the four corners, the four quarters, which are the footwells, which is where the majority of the rot happens, because all these low spots are what hold the moisture that causes the rot. You can see this section here is elevated. That's where the seat goes. It's not rotted. You can still see factory primer. That metal's in really good condition. These are the steel plates right here that hold the motors that actuate the seat adjustments. Now you can see on the passenger side that the footwell is completely rotted out, going up into the transmission tunnel. The top of the tunnel is still good. The driver's side footwell is gone. This section right here, right behind the accelerator pedal, is slightly elevated, so it's still in good shape. And you can see that there are a lot of pinholes in the back floorboards. The driver's side floor pan's got pinholes, and of course big sections missing. Same thing with the passenger side. Just in really bad condition. And this one, this side here, is going up and rotting into the support for the back seat. This piece right here supports the back seat and also acts as a floor stiffener. And there's pinholes up in here, big holes, pieces missing over in here. So all this is going to have to be replaced. So the question is how to get started on this. So the first thing I notice is how it went together. The floor pan comes up here and it comes to this seam right here, and at this seam there's a flange that's folded down, and then the firewall, the toe board part of the firewall, comes down, and there's also a flange that's folded down, and the two flanges are spot welded together. And there was seam sealer right here, but I removed it. So that's how the floor pan is held to the firewall. From underneath the car, this is what those two flanges look like that are spot welded together. This being your floor pan, and up here being your firewall. So there's this kick panel right here that's still on the driver's side, and I took it off of the passenger side to reveal this bracket right here. That is at the base of the A-pillar, so I'm going to call that the A-pillar lower support bracket. I took a Sharpie and I outlined this area right here a little bit to sort of give you an idea of the shape of this thing. So the question is, where do you begin replacing this floor pan? So if you notice, this bracket here, the A-pillar lower support bracket, is attached on top of this metal floor pan. So it's probably spot welded here. So in order to take off the floor pan and replace it, first I'm going to have to take off this bracket. And then the problem becomes, where do I find that bracket? And I wasn't able to find the bracket, so I'm going to have to make it. It's a stamped out piece, which obviously I can't stamp it out, so I'm going to have to build it. So in order to build it, I just picked some of the prominent features of it, which are the flange. Got a flange here, and I got a flange on the other side. And then I've got a center section, which I basically outlined with the Sharpie. The center section is flat right in here, but then becomes radiused right here, and then it flattens back out right here on the horizontal. The vertical has this, where this flat spot is, that flat spot is rotated clockwise a little bit, and the flat area of the horizontal is rotated back a little bit. Also, the relationship between the horizontal and the vertical is not 90 degrees, and you can see the center line of this horizontal and the center line of the vertical are also offset, appear to be about 4 inches offset from one another. So to get started, I'm going to try to duplicate the flanges, and then I'm going to try to duplicate the center section. That'll be 3 pieces. I'm going to do it and use this piece while it's still in position as sort of a mold to help me get the angle, the relationship between the vertical and the horizontal correct, and also to get all the contours and curves and the flanges correct. I'm just going to build it right on top of this until I get to a certain point. I can put the flange on top of the flange, the centerpiece on top of the centerpiece, and the other flange on top of the flange. And the dimension between here and the flange will stay the same. This flange and here will stay the same. Now from here with the floor gone, you can see the A-pillar support bracket that's right here, that's spot welded on this flange on top of the floor pan, is stacked on top of this bracket right here, which cantilevers off of this frame mount right here, and where it cantilevers off goes over here and is connected to the inner rocker panel. So that's how it's supported. A-pillar bracket. Right here is the cantilevered bracket that goes to the rocker panel on top of the frame mount right here. And that's what's holding this thing together. So just for reference, here it is from below. Here's the bracket off of the frame. This is the cantilevered bracket, or the body mount. This flange right here is what the inner rocker panel is spot welded to, and that lower support bracket for the A-pillar is right above here on top of the floor pan. I'll make paper templates first. So the flange follows this contour, this curve right here, obviously. So if I can just get on that curve, I should be able to create a flange once I get this curve. I'm lining the paper up at the top of the bracket. Probably take several attempts. And the two sides are different, so do the same thing for the other side. Wind up kind of freehanding it a little bit. Just got to get close at first. So there's the paper templates after several attempts. I left them a little long and probably a little wider than the flange that's there, but that's always easier to trim after it's all said and done. So with the flange is done, I'm going to make the centerpiece now. And the vertical on the centerpiece has a flat area right in here. And then it goes almost to a completely radiused, rounded, down here to the horizontal piece that becomes flat again. So the flat surface ends right about here. And about right here. And here's your horizontal flat surface right in here. So that's basically going to be the centerpiece that I make. Kind of freehanding it again at first. Okay, and so there's the center section paper template. So now I'll transfer all three templates over to a piece of 090. So it's not that difficult to get this radius in. But the vertical leg and the horizontal leg will have to be rotated and twisted a little bit, tweaked to get to line up correctly. And it's just a matter of trying it several times. So when it's done, the radius will fit tight down here, and I'm just holding the piece in place, but the flange is down flat on the original flange. And this flange right here is parallel to where it needs to be welded in. It just gets welded in here, stitch welded, and stitch welded here. This side is welded the same way rather than being spot welded. And so now all three pieces will need to be fitted the same way. So when I put my new piece, centerpiece, on top of the existing, and I hold it tight against the flat area of the existing, you can see that my horizontal piece is clocked clockwise forward of where it needs to be. This surface here, this edge right here, needs to be back here. So I'm going to have to try to put a twist in it. And incidentally, this is one of the reasons I'm trying to build my pieces on top of the existing piece, because I don't know the relationship between the vertical and the horizontal. This is not a 90-degree angle, and also this vertical is rotated clockwise a little bit, and the horizontal is racked back a little bit. So it's very difficult to make any other way, in my opinion. A little more radius. See what that does. So with my vertical flat against the original vertical behind it, now my horizontal is clocked into the correct position and it's parallel. I've got just a light pressure I'm pushing down to keep the radius in tight. But I believe that's where I want to be, right there. I went ahead and narrowed this flange right here because it needs to fit between this vertical little shoulder, little step in this plate, and the main body of the bracket right here. So I narrowed it. So now I can get the piece to fit tight against the original flange without putting any tension or anything on it. On this piece here, the center section, where I needed 1 3/4 right here, I went ahead and made it a little bit narrower because I only wanted it to represent this flat area. And again, now that it fits flat and tight against the original piece, I can just clamp it into place. And this flange here, had to narrow it, also had to put a step in it, and I had to rotate it clockwise. The only place that this flange fits down tight against this plate is right up in this area here. There's a step right here that you can't see very easily. But all the contours, all the bends, it fits into place without putting any type of pressure on it at all. By putting my piece of steel, the new piece of steel, directly on top of the old bracket right here, and using the old bracket as a model to form my new steel tube, and then putting this piece of steel flange directly on top of the original steel flange, the distance between here and here on my new bracket that I'm making should be the same as the distance between here and here on the original bracket that's underneath. But to put my filler pieces in, I can't put my filler pieces in on top of the old bracket here and here, because that would make my new bracket a little wider than the old one. Not that it makes that much difference, but I want to try to maintain all the overall dimensions the best I can. So I'm going to temporarily tack weld a piece of metal from this flange to the centerpiece, and from the centerpiece to this flange. I'll do that in 2 or 3 or 4 locations, and that will maintain the relationship between the flanges and the center section, and I can remove it from the car, and then I can work on making a template for my fill-in pieces. that'll make it easier now to make templates for the filler pieces. Just trying to leave an impression of the edge of the flange and the edge of the centerpiece in the tinfoil. As long as you can make out the impression of the edge, you can trim it. And it's okay if it's a little big. That'll get me close. Welded it on the inside and the outside. Wound up putting the filler pieces in two pieces. Had to cut it right in here, I think, because I had a lot of trouble getting it to bend. Same with on the other side, 2 pieces. But that's it ground down, and that's ready to go in. Here's kind of a side-by-side comparison. I won't know if it fits right until I go to install it. Might have to tweak it a little bit, we'll see. But for now, I'm going to set it aside, and I'll use it when it comes time to put the floor pans in. That'll be another video, so that's it for now.